Guys, welcome back. This is Eric here with Guitarsenal, and today we're going to be talking about the Komet K.O.D.A. This is a very new overdrive pedal that is out on the market, and I know there's a lot of different overdrives out there. We've got it set up for a very transparent and almost boost-like characteristic for the intro there. Just having a little bit of fun on some improvised fun there. And Komet basically makes a lot of different guitar amps and everything like that. And this is sort of one of their ventures into the pedal world. And the K.O.D.A. is meant to be very much like an amplifier in terms of the way it's made. So it is essentially a pedal that is very much like the front end of an amplifier, in that you can set pre-gain, you can set the gain structure the way you want, you've got an EQ. So you've got some different things that you can really do with this pedal. You can really change the way that the pedal behaves and interacts with your playing, much like you would maybe set up the type of sag you might want to have in the amp based on like maybe the way you set up the preamp tubes, or maybe the way you set up the actual preamp section. It gives you a lot of flexibility running into the front end of a tube amp to get some different sounds. So we're going to go over some of those sounds a little bit, and hopefully we've made it sound halfway decent. I personally feel that the pedal really excels as a boost more than anything else. We found just in our initial observations, I'm going to clear this loop here, guys, that the pedal tends to, at least, I mean, we're playing through a late 67 Super Reverb, Fender Super Reverb, and I'm using a Telecaster, so I'm using it more of like kind of a blues and soul and a little bit more jazz fusion kind of setting. Approaching this pedal almost from a sense of the way that I would try to integrate maybe like an Alfonso Hermida Zen Drive or a Jetter pedal or anything like that, or any type of good quality overdrive pedal for my particular purposes. I find that as you increase the drive on this pedal, it can get a little bit into crazy territory, and that may be what some of you guys want, and it may not be what some of you want, but we're going to go through the sweep of the range of the knobs and let you just sort of hear, and we'll talk a little bit about what we think as we go. But you've got true bypass, in and out, standard, you know, obviously 9-volt power, which is pretty cut and dry. Chad does have some basic instructions in front of him here, and we're going to go through this together. We're learning along with you guys. This is a pedal that I borrowed from the guys over at Atlanta Discount Music. They're a great bunch of fellas there, and they recommended this as be something we try out, so we thought we'd get it out here. And not a lot of people really know about the K.O.D.A. yet. It's still a very new pedal, so let's get into it. Have a little bit of fun. Why don't we hear the Naked Super? Get rid of that delay. All right, I think we can all agree that sounds pretty nice. As a basis for building your tone, you know, you got a nice sparkly, clean sound, which is kind of really what I go for more in my style of playing guitar. It may not be for everybody, but that's what we've got to work with. Let's engage the K.O.D.A. and Chad, you go ahead, and I'm just going to play. You kind of tell me what you want to hear, and we'll go from there.
So the way this thing's set up with the drive control, this is the first control your guitar signal sees. It determines how hard the signal from your guitar drives the K.O.D.A.'s preamp. Lower drive settings will result in cleaner sounds and higher headroom.
Let's go for that.
Let's see.
Okay.
All right, engaged.
Okay.
All right.
Bridge pickup, maybe?
Yeah, go with the. let's turn that drive back down a little bit.
Okay.
Just to push it just a tiny bit. And let's hear what the gain sounds like. Real quick, with the gain setting here, in the manual it says the next control in the line is the gain setting. It determines how much harmonic distortion is created in the K.O.D.A's preamp section.
Let's hear it.
So. Not bad.
It doesn't quite really have like the compression I want to hear though. That's one initial observation about the pedal that I've made is it seems that at a lot of the drive settings it just doesn't really compress like I want to hear.
That's one.
It doesn't squeeze the signal. I don't really hear that.
Well, that's one of those things about like the Zen Drive and like that Jetter, you know, the GS124 we tried out. I mean, it just has that nice like tight sound to it. And with the gain control here, I noticed that it adds a lot of bass into the signal.
Yeah, and I hear a little bit of treble kind of in there too that sort of just won't go away no matter what you do. The thing about it, it's just from my perspective, is this seems like a good drive for the kind of guy that wants something just incredibly transparent to put over the top of his amp. And maybe you want that loose characteristic. I would say that the characteristic of this pedal is actually very close to what they tout it to be. It's meant to be kind of an amp in a box. And it does have a sagging characteristic that an amp would have, a tube amp would have. So it does create a sort of sag and a looseness that is not really what I would say would be characteristic of a compression coming from an overdrive pedal. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? It's more of an amp in its own right than it is an overdrive pedal. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. All right, we're going to crank this thing up, like, see what happens here. Just see what it sounds like with the gain and drive settings all the way up.
Okay, gain and drive all the way up. And then what I'll do is I'll try to back off on the volume knob to sort of clean it up. Why don't we do that? All right, so here it is all the way out.
Crank it back up a little bit.
All right, and that's with now one thing I will say, it does clean up beautifully. That's with the volume on the guitar only about 15% of the way up, so that's not bad. Let's go ahead and get it back up. Okay, so this is full volume on the guitar. Now one thing I will say about that sound, give credit where it's due, it does sound very, very much like a cranked blackface Fender. It has a very cranked Fender kind of sound to me, to my ear. All right, look, wherever you have it set right there, did you change anything?
I bumped the drive up a little bit, and the gain's
Right.
still up here about maybe 75%.
That
or so.
sounds phenomenal. I can hear like a bit of the characteristic of the EQ section in my amp, what the power tubes are doing. I've got the super reverb on about 4, so you're getting a mild bit of compression. But this amp, the way you're driving it, it is pushing the front end of the amp, and I can still hear a bit of that characteristic in the front end of the amp. It's very warm, black-faced Fender kind of sound. And so I can see a lot of people have been comparing this pedal, and they're calling it like Zen Drive Killer, and that it's supposed to be close to a Zen Drive. I wouldn't say, it's not fair to compare this pedal to a Zen Drive, because this pedal is more like an amplifier pre-section that behaves like an amplifier, a tube amplifier. And really, the Zen Drive is a different animal than that. It's a shame we don't have one to compare. That actually sounds pretty good right there.
So this next little deal here. So this says in the manual, the output stage is one of the unique features of the K.O.D.A. Basically, it's an op-amp stage that simulates the way the output stage of a tube amplifier reacts to being driven by the signal from a preamp. Flipping the switch to the up position expands the tonal spectrum and gives the K.O.D.A. a more dynamic response to both playing dynamics and volume control settings.
Well,
So,
let's test that.
all right, I'm going to flip it up.
So let him hear what it sounded like before, and then we'll change it.
Yeah, hang on. Well, you heard that. All right, go ahead. Roll your volume back a little bit. See how it cleans up? Let's engage the output stage. Now I did notice that switch, it's a little finicky in the lower position there. It might have to be a warranty thing. All right, so it's on. All right, go ahead and play. Clean it up.
Clean it up.
Let's see how it cleans up.
Remember, we're on the neck pickup too. I'll probably try the treble pickup. That's the volume about 50% of the way down. Basically, when I break out that volume a bit, it's putting me right back into super reverb territory. I mean, because that right there, that sounds like naked amp. Like right now, okay, 50% down on the volume. Now disengage the pedal. All right, I'm going to go all the way back up on the volume. All right, 50% down on the volume, engage the pedal. See how similar that is? So you get that bit of overhead, you get that bit of push on the front end, but you can dial out your volume and you get back down into the original characteristic of your amplifier. So that is kind of cool. I do like that. I will say that on some of the higher end of the gain spectrum on the pedal, I do hear a bass frequency that doesn't seem like it wants to go away no matter how much bass you dial out.
Well, we've got the bass dialed all the way out too. So
Now look, and to be fair, guys, I'm the kind of guy, I really do like to, like on my Nobles, in fact, kill the K.O.D.A, hit the Nobles. On my Nobles, I have the low about 80% of the way up, and I have the high and mids pretty well scooped out, and I keep dial that drive down just a smidge. about right there. This is, I usually keep my nobles, and just so you guys have an idea, this is typically about the kind of like lead sound I like to have right here. You have to admit, that sounds pretty good.
Sounds pretty good.
Let's compare it to the Komet. It's this sort of mid, like it's got a mid hump, it's got a bass hump, and it's got this high end pierce that doesn't go away.
Well, and we've got the treble cut all the way out.
It's not bad. It sounds good. It sounds good in its own right. It really does.
I think it
I'm
sounds,
just noodling, guys.
I think it sounds a little bit better at kind of the lower gain settings.
Maybe as a boost. So why don't we add like maybe the nobles in with that as a boost and switch the K.O.D.A on and off with the nobles engaged, and let's just see how it behaves with other overdrives.
Okay.
Guys, we're not listening to this in a mix. We're not listening to it with a band. This is just us in the room here having fun. It is a cool pedal. I like it. I'm definitely not saying that it's not a good pedal. It is a little bit outside of the wheelhouse of what I am used to and what I normally run. But for some of you, I could certainly see where this would be something useful to you. It fattens it up a bit.
It does.
For sure.
I have to say, it sounds pretty good with the nobles as a boost.
Correct.
With that gain.
And it sounds good as a boost in its own regard, like we used it sort of in the intro, kind of boost territory.
A little bit.
Yeah, and I think if you are going to run the pedal on sort of the higher end of the gain spectrum, I think treating it like an amp in its own right, which I believe is sort of the intended purpose of this thing, treating it like an amp in its own right is probably the way to really dial it in and use your volume control to really do all the work. If you need a clean sound, break it down, get your clean sound. You want a touch of a line or whatever you want to put in there, rhythm or lead sounds, dial up the volume, and there you go. I think that's probably where this pedal excels. And that's just our initial observation, but not bad. I'm going to try it on the treble pickup. So here's the Nobles, which sounds glorious. Let's add the Komet. It does fatten it up.
It does.
It seems like it really would fatten up just about any other especially that Nobles is a really kind of transparent sounding overdrive, and I've actually had some people tell me that they feel like the Nobles is a really thin sounding pedal. It doesn't really add a lot of juice in there, but I like that characteristic about it. I like that I can have the amp kind of set the way I want and then hit the Nobles, and it's very transparent, and I can just really dial out, not a ton of that drive if I want. I can have just a touch of drive, and for my purposes, that's kind of the sound I go for. But the Komet K.O.D.A, it does have an amp-like characteristic and an amp-like sag that just about every other overdrive pedal that we've compared it to so far, in terms of the stuff we've dealt with, doesn't really seem to be in that same wheelhouse. It's kind of its own thing.
The only pedal that had a little bit of sag was the Englishman.
The Englishman, yeah, the Love Pedal Englishman had a bit of sort of just natural sag that was present in the pedal that this reminds me very much of. There is it's not really like a compression that I would consider it, more like a sag, like power tubes failing, like it has that, push to the edge sound when you get it on the top end of the spectrum. And I almost wonder if on a regular tube amp, when you start really cranking a tube amp, if you get this sort of bass, middle bass frequency, or if you get this higher treble frequency that no matter how you EQ the amp, if it's just there and doesn't go away. I just wonder if that's a characteristic of a tube amp and that's what they're trying to copy. I'm not sure.
Don't know.
I'm not saying it sounds bad. It's just different.
Let's crank this. We were kind of noodling around with this pedal a little bit before we started making this video, and I think having Chad playing around with some of the knobs and sort of us just experimenting with the sounds, it does have some very, very usable sounds. The boost function and using it as a boost, it's not really boost function, but setting it up as a boost seems to work really well with other pedals. The sound of the pedal is not bad. It's probably something that, for me personally, is not inside of my wheelhouse, but I can see where it would be a useful thing to some people, depending on what they're trying to do. Especially if you're running a solid state amp or something, you need to add some beef and juice to, a weak sounding amp, or if you've got an amp that's just not delivering the goods and you really want to push the front end of it and get it behaving more like a tube amplifier, that is where this thing is really going to excel. Maybe I would say dare so more than running it into an already
point of no return amp that's already a good amp to begin with. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's not okay to run it with a good tube amp, but that just seems to me that that's what they're going for, is maybe just to really rejuvenate a otherwise boring signal, I guess would be the way to look at it. Not bad. Anything else that we haven't discussed? I don't want this video to be terribly long. I know these videos tend to be a lot longer than other demo reviews, guys. I mean, or gear reviews, gear demos, if you will. We try to kind of dive into them and play with them and really sort of think about where it sits in a board and where it sits in a mix. I mean, that's sort of our go of it. It's just how we tend to kind of do it there.
I think we're good.
Very cool.
Unless you want to just hear how much bass this thing actually has.
Yeah. Let's hear that bass that we were talking about.
All right, run it.
Okay, I'll put it on the bridge pickup just to be nice. It's got some does have some range, which is kind of cool. You know, that probably worked for some folks. Guys, thanks for watching today's video. We hope you're enjoying these. It takes a good bit of effort and time to put these together. We hope you enjoy watching them. We hope that we make this gear sound halfway decent. And we hope you can understand where we're coming from when it comes to the way we put these videos together. We're trying to make sure you guys understand how these pedals work to the best of our ability, how they sound to the best of our ability. And all we really want to do is just try to help people. We're not trying to influence your purchase decision, but we do want to try to help people get an idea what these things sound like. Trust me, I buy gear, lots of gear, okay? And I know when I go to buy a pedal or something, I go and I watch YouTube videos and I listen to sound samples, and I want to hear as much of it as I can to help me influence and make my decision as best I can. And I try to put these demos out to help the internet community at large. So I hope you guys understand that, you know, we're not trying to talk bad about anybody in terms of the pedals they make or anything like that. We're just trying to call it the way we see it, show it off the way we see it. And this pedal has many uses that'll fill several niches for a lot of different people. It's probably outside of my wheelhouse just a bit, but not a bad pedal, really cool, got a good sound to it. It does have some nice tones going on. Guys, thanks for watching today's video yet again. And we'll see you next time. Absolutely.